All right, it's Jerry Mason, the Kickin Lawyer, and we're here on another Law Talk. So thank you guys for taking time out of your day to join us. As always, like, follow, subscribe to the content. We're on all social media platforms, all podcast platforms, YouTube, etc. So make sure you check that out. And then we are on TikTok. If you go to Kickin Lawyer on TikTok, actually, I think it might be under my name. I think either one pops up. But you can go see some, for entertainment purposes only, legal advice. And then Michelle Allen has been a longtime sponsor of the show. She's your go-to in the area if you're going to buy, sell, rent, lease real estate. She'd be glad to help you out. She's also a good community leader. And then Mason's High Octane Martial Arts. We have two locations, one in Covington and one in Millington. We're running a special right now. $99 gets a uniform and 30 days of lessons. So just visit masonsmartialarts.com. We'll get you set up. And then if you want to buy some really unique Christmas gifts, visit us at Jam Books and Records on the square here in Covington. We got a big Black Friday sale coming up. We've got books, records, signed memorabilia, comics, all that stuff. And then if you need help with digital, online stuff, website design, commercials, visit masonitemarketing.com. And joining me today, I'm excited because I've done this for a long time now, and I've always wanted to have a prosecutor on. So it's like justice is a two-sided coin, and on one side is the Kickin Lawyer, and on the other side is Joni Reagan. So how are you doing?
Team America.
Yeah, Team America. So how are you doing,
well.
Joni?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
We just saw each other in court this morning.
We did.
Yeah.
We did.
And I've told you this before. I've been very open about it. I've talked about it on this and my TikToks and stuff too. We as defense lawyers, probably like you do with defense lawyers, we build opinions of prosecutors. And it's not that the high opinion is usually not of the prosecutors that just roll over. We have a neighboring county that I won't mention where there's a prosecutor there I deal with a lot. I like the guy, but I know usually he's going to just roll over, right? So typically as a defense lawyer, I look at, are you being reasonable? But at the same time, I expect you to do your job,
Right.
And I've always felt like you do a great job at it.
Well,
And,
thank you.
when you were in Lauderdale and in Tipton, I enjoy working with you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Sometimes we butt heads, but I think that's the way it's supposed to work sometimes.
But I think there's a mutual respect you need to have for each other, and I think we both have that. And, I have to respect the job you do, and you have to respect the job I do. And, I had a judge tell me once I interned for a circuit judge in Jackson County, Mississippi, and she said, it's like a play and everybody plays a part. And I'm not trying to diminish or minimize the roles that we play, but it's very true and it's accurate, and it's a good way to look at the justice system and the roles that each of us have to play.
So, and I want to talk more about that too, but why don't you tell everybody sort of your background, how you got where you are as an attorney, and why did you go to law school?
Okay, this is a good one.
And pull your, either move over, because it's,
Okay.
There you go, that's better.
Okay, so when I went to a little school in Dyersburg, Tennessee called Hollis Powell Elementary School, and we had a career day, and, professionals from all over the community came to the school and talked about their careers and what they did. And there was a female attorney named Mariana Molly Williams that came to the school. And she talked about being an attorney. And she said, when I was in school, I stayed in trouble for always running my mouth. And everyone told me I should put my mouth to good use and become an attorney. And at that moment, everyone looked at me. and honestly, I'm like, you know what? I think I could be really good at that. I really do well. I like to talk. I have the gift of gab. So that was the beginning of how that happened. It sounds like something really insignificant, but that was the moment that I decided I wanted to be an attorney, and I was probably in 4th grade. And
So you knew all that time then?
I wanted to be an attorney, yes. Now, there was a short period of time. My sister-in-law, she's deceased. Her name was Carol Parham, but she was from Dyersburg also. She was a high school English teacher, and she was a positive force, I guess, or a positive influence in my life. And she was real big on education. And for a short period of time, I thought I might want to be an English major and get my PhD. And then as time progressed, I knew where my calling was. I interned in the DA's office, in General Bivens' office, one summer when I was an undergrad. And that just further solidified my decision to go to law school. And I always knew I wanted to be a prosecutor.
So that was my next question. So when you got out, did you go straight into working as a prosecutor?
No, I did not. I went to law school at the University of Mississippi or Ole Miss, and I interned. A lot of students go into insurance defense, and the money's decent starting out. But for me, I was a mother. I had young children, and the billable hours requirement. And I'm not knocking anyone that wants to do that. Everybody has their journey and what they like and what they don't like. But for me, it was, if I had a sick child, you're not just being present 40 hours. You have to bill 40 hours.
Yeah.
And I had a child. My middle daughter stayed sick a lot with ear infections, and so I was going in on Saturdays and Sundays and making up the time, and I got tired of feeling like I owed increments of my life and missing out on time with my children on the weekends. And so General Donovan, Mike Donovan had an opening in the DA's office, and ironically, my former father-in-law had Mr. David Livingston. He had told me that there was an opening in General Donovan's office. And I interviewed, and he called me the next day and offered me the job, and the rest is history. I started December 1st, 2007, so I'm 17 years.
Yeah, you've been doing it a minute then.
Yeah.
Well, you don't look like you've been doing it that long, John.
Well, thank you. It's the Botox.
Well, that's interesting. So for people that don't know, and this is my opinion, you could say it's right or wrong on this. So I've done the billable hour thing too, sort of doing family law. And my opinion is, and so the reason I say this is I did this analysis because when we started hiring associates here, I wanted to have a time requirement, but at the same time, I didn't want it to be, because most places, these big firms that you're talking about that do insurance defense and all this stuff, they do live and die by this billable hour. And actually people, it's misleading because people say, oh, well, it's 40 hours. That's a normal work week. As a lawyer, it's like a 2-to-1 ratio. So 40 hours is actually 80 hours at least. Because there's a lot of time in there that you don't bill, but you're still having to be present and do things. So that's why when she says the 40 hours is a struggle to bill every week, is because it's really more like 80 hours, billable hours. So we always halved it here. Like when I had, they had to keep track of the time, even though we do now flat rates as criminal lawyers, we would do 20 hours is what they were required to do. Because to me, that was probably a 40-hour work week.
Right.
So yeah, I get that. I felt that same pain when we were doing all the family law and stuff. So different than you, I was a cop for 12 years. And so I sort of got, what I call it is your side. You can call it the white hat side or whatever of justice. And then I've now obviously been doing criminal defense for around 10 years and now exclusively do criminal defense. Do you, and I ask you this, and I already kind of know the answer, Joni, because I work with you regularly. Do you feel any disadvantage as a prosecutor not having seen worked on the other side? Or do you see other, because I don't think you have this problem. That's why it's a bad question for you. But are you kind of aware that maybe some prosecutors are real biased? Like they just believe wholeheartedly what this victim says?
I think that comes with time. I would say my first year or two, it took me a little bit to get my footing and be able to truly be able to evaluate a case and what it was worth, and if I take it to trial, what my chances are of conviction. We say this all the time, justice comes in many forms. Sometimes it may not be the result we want as far as a conviction for the highest charged crime. Sometimes it's the person just having to go through the criminal justice system and all that entails, and having to spend the money to hire an attorney and fines and court costs. There's so many different aspects in which you can view that. But I feel like now, with the experience that I have, and after 17 years, I'm better able to do so. I will say I try, when defense attorneys come to me and they tell me their side of the story, I do. If they have a witness they're fine with me talking to, I don't mind speaking to that witness just so I can assess their credibility. I usually take that information back to my officer to make sure my officer has interviewed that person, to see if there's a statement, to see if it's consistent, if that person had previously spoken to the officer, if what that person is telling you, if you're the defense attorney, if it's consistent with what they told the officer. If the officer had not taken their statement or spoken to them, usually I try to get the officer to get a written statement from them and do some further investigation. I'm not stupid. I think everyone has a motivation to sometimes be untruthful. I don't take what someone tells me is the gospel truth, just like you probably don't anymore. We've all got those knots on our heads. I try to be fair. I try to be reasonable. And, this sounds cliche, but it's been quoted in Supreme Court cases. Our duty and obligation as a prosecutor is to convict the guilty, but also protect the innocent. Mm-hmm. And if there's a doubt in my mind whether or not they're guilty, I'm going to try my best to resolve that case in a way that's fair and just.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I appreciate that perspective. And I would say that it's interesting that, because I agree with you. I think you have evolved that way. And I can't speak so much for years ago when you did it, but I just know working with you in the last several years, I usually find you to be and you're usually very open too, where even if you don't agree with me, you at least listen to me, which is more than some places will. And that's honestly, I've said this before too, but we're very lucky through the 25th. I think I've worked with, I don't go to Hardeman much. We do some, so I know who's over there, Joe.
General Van Dyke.
Yeah, Joe. But I'm aware of all of you, and I haven't had really bad experiences. There's occasional times when we'll butt heads a little bit. even the J name, I won't say his name there, but he and I are pretty close, but we'll butt heads, right? But generally, y'all are all just, I think, good people trying to do a good job for this district. So, and I say that not just as an opponent for you, but just for everybody in the 25th. So I say that. But what I was going to say is I've had experience in some jurisdictions, specifically Madison County, where I feel like some of those prosecutors developed the opposite way, and judges too, where they didn't have experience on the other side, either as cops or defense lawyers, and instead of growing more, like jaded to the point that they realize people lied to them, it's more, we got to prosecute it harder, and no, I'm not listening at all. It's like it goes the other way. That's very frustrating to a defense lawyer because they lie to me too, right? But I'm always open that there's a couple of sides to the argument here.
Well, and to your point, I can't say because I have never done defense that I'm always going to be able to poke a hole in a case like you would, because you may see things I don't see. But then there's times that I do try my best to evaluate the case and try to find all the little loopholes and try to anticipate how you are going to come at me. Where am I weak? Where do I need to firm up my proof? And that was something that I learned from Julie Pillow from working with her for so many years, because she did defense for so long. And so I do feel like I have an advantage in working under her because she taught me how to do that. And that's something that you just learn over time and experience, and like I said, getting those knots on your head and losing some cases.
Yes, I learned a lot from Brian, but a lot of times it was what not to do. So he would, what Brian and Julie's real smart too. Brian though is a really exceptional intellect. He really is. Don't tell him I said this, but he's super smart. Like he's genius level smart. And the problem with that is people like him don't understand why normal level intellect people or maybe below level like me don't understand why I don't get something. So like it's so easy to him. So when Brian and I first got together, he was going to teach me this and teach me that. And it would just be like, yeah, just do it. Just do this. It's easy, I had no idea. Like, I didn't even know. Like, I remember he was trying to get me to do an appeal, and he was wanting me to do the where you take the transcript and the first thing you do, you take the transcript, get it ready, on the appeal. Anyway, I didn't even know what he was talking about doing. Like, I didn't even understand it. And he's using words that we didn't use in law school, because law school didn't really teach you how to be able to practice as a lawyer.
No.
So anyway, my point is, like, it's funny how we have different mentors, and the mentors teach you, but sometimes it's what not to do or ways not to do it. And now fast forward, Brian and I specifically, it's kind of like when you were over there with Julie, and I think you fit well with these guys too, but I think we sort of fit on each other's strengths and weaknesses. Brian is real smart, but he's not really good at communicating that to clients. He's not going to go hold their hand in jail. He's not going to sit down and explain this. He's going to be like, this is what you need to do. And not, it's just is what it is.
No, I would have never guessed that.
But I have to call them. I have to go see them. I have to do the jail visits. I usually present the offers. I do a lot of that kind of stuff. But, he does a lot of the heavy thinking. And anyway, I think it works out. That's why I've missed him. Don't tell him that either. But these last few months where he's doing that part-time PD thing, I hadn't gotten to see him regular. And I'm definitely feeling the heat over here. But so let me ask you this. Because I know I have cops that watch this, right? I had one last night in Walmart stop me and said he really appreciates my TikToks because I do a lot for the cops. So if you were talking to a law enforcement officer, what would you say is like one of your biggest pet peeves that cops do that makes it harder for you to do your job? And then also on the other end, what's something that they do that makes your job easier as from the cop perspective?
There are a few things. One of the issues that I've encountered a lot lately is I think sometimes they get a little bit hyper vigilant at times, and that's probably not the correct word I want to use because I don't want it to have a negative connotation. I have great respect and admiration for our law enforcement. I feel like it's a team effort, but I also think it's our job to make them better and tell them when they mess up. And sometimes they'll initiate a stop, and if they would have just waited a little bit longer, they probably would have gotten maybe a stronger PC, and we get challenged on the stop because they were just maybe a little bit too overzealous at times, and so I think that goes to a search warrant, or not a search warrant case, a stop that we had in juvenile court. And I was like, look, this is a bad stop. If you would have just waited a little bit, you would have had your PC to initiate the stop. There wasn't enough, and everything got suppressed. And you know which case I'm talking about.
Yeah, that one real quick, though, was another good sign of why y'all are all good folks, including the cop. Because that cop, just so y'all know, Joni's usually, and I usually be transparent with her too. We're really transparent on certain stuff. So she literally calls the cop because it looks like in the narrative there may not really have been a good reason to stop the car. They had a suspicion of something, but really no good probable cause. Anyway, so she calls the cop in front of me, has him on speaker, and asks him, and he could have lied. He could have said, and he didn't.
He was honest.
And so then they did what they should have done and were willing to dismiss it because there wasn't a grounds for the stop. But my point is, like other places I go, one would have never let me listen to him talk to the cop. Number two, even if they heard that, probably would have all of a sudden tried to manipulate the facts to cover it up. You know what I mean? Instead of
first thing when you walk through the door, I'm like, Jerry, there's a problem with the stop.
Yeah. So that transparency is awesome in this area, which again to me shows that we're so lucky around here where there's not all this. Everybody's just trying to do their job. Everybody's just trying to get to justice. But I interrupted you, so go ahead. What was the next thing?
Another thing is obviously we prove our cases by testimony from witnesses. And I get it, you know, these guys, they're working long hours, there's so much paperwork, and if they give someone, and now I think some of this is becoming more obsolete with body cams, if they get a verbal statement, which is always the best, but when there's a written statement, I've had oftentimes they just let someone write a statement, they don't go back and review it, the person writes it vague enough that there's enough loopholes when they come to court, they can change their story, and I don't have much, I hate to say leverage, but I can't really get them for filing a false report or lying to the law enforcement officer, but they give themselves enough leeway. And if they would just take the time and go back and read that statement and ask them to firm up and maybe clarify what they're saying or be a little bit more specific, it would make it a lot easier for us to prosecute cases and assess cases. That's been, especially with regard to domestics. Now, I don't do those as much anymore, but when I was in Lauderdale, that was my biggest complaint. If I would have gotten a better statement, it would have made all the difference as to whether or not I could have gone forward with the case as opposed to try to resolve the case and settle it for something lesser.
How frustrating is that as a prosecutor when you are on a domestic and the victim all of a sudden, of course, changes their story, which happens a lot because they get back together or work it out. And I mean, you have discretion to prosecute it, but clearly it makes it a much weaker case.
I mean, one thing I cannot stand is to be lied to, and I can be a little hot-headed sometimes, but just a little bit. But I appreciate when someone comes in and says, look, I love him, I want to be with him, I'm going to be with him, yes, this happened, we're trying to work it out. I can appreciate that, and most of the time they give me something to work with, and they're like, look, I'm going to be honest if I have to testify, but if there's any way you can work this case out, and maybe them not go to jail, or you know he's the breadwinner, you know our livelihood depends on him.
Yeah.
Obviously, I try to refer them to RAP and maybe to get some counseling, just so a lot of women don't know their worth and don't know their value, and they accept so much less than what they deserve. And so I do try to have those conversations, but at the end of the day, they're grown women and they're going to make their decisions. And don't get me wrong, there are men that are victims of domestic violence also. So I don't mean to diminish or minimize domestic violence as it relates to men, but the majority is women. Let's be honest, statistically speaking. But what really makes me mad is when they come in and I know what happened, I know what they told the officer was true, and they come in and fall on the sword and say, I lied. And at that point, I have them arrested for filing a false report, and they go to jail and they have to make a bond, and now they're the defendant. And then the person that beat them or hit them or whatever the case may be, they usually walk scot-free. And some people, I mean, we can go back and forth whether that's the right way to do it, but our law enforcement puts so much time and effort into these cases. And so I feel like it's a slap in their face when they work so hard on behalf of this victim, and them to come in and diminish the hard work that they put in and say, oh, I lied. Like, it's no big deal, no remorse, no consideration for anyone's time and how everyone has gone to bat to fight for their cause. So that's the stance that I typically take, is I have the person charged with filing a false report. But now, say something happens down the road and they tell, and there's another domestic, then obviously their credibility comes into question, because you as the defense attorney is going to be like, well, I had this conviction right here where you said you lied to the police before, or you lying, so that can come back and bite them in the fanny. But
so another issue that I've talked about at some length is I try to not get emotionally vested in the cases, but it's very difficult. And even if sometimes I'm not so much vested in the client, the defendant, but I'm vested in the outcomes, I'm competitive like most of us. And so, and then especially when they go to trial, when they go to trial, we're all guns blazes, We don't
like to lose.
Yes, none of us want to lose. Do you struggle with that at all? With it following you home? Like any of the cases? I know there's one in particular that's probably following you right now, but I mean, in general, are you able to separate that, or you get emotionally vested in them?
Most of the time I can. When my girls were younger and I had child sexual abuse cases, and especially when the victims were close to my girls' ages, it was hard for me not to internalize those and personalize those, because when I would see those little girls, I would think about my children. Mm-hmm. So there were times that it was difficult. And there's one right now that I feel pretty strongly about. But generally speaking, I try my best to compartmentalize and do the flip the switch between work and home. However, if you ask my middle daughter, she says, Mom, you're always in a bad mood when you come home. Yeah. So there's that.
Yeah. I'm dealing with some anxieties and sleep issues now that I'm sure are still tied up with all these cases, because you always want to do a good job, and there's a bunch of them, but that's a real factor. I've mentioned before, for me, I was a cop for a long time that involved arguably the highest stress moments a human can experience in life, where you're literally chasing somebody with a gun in the middle of the night that's shooting at you, and you got to apprehend them, fight with them, detain them. That's super stressful, right? But in the heat of that, the stress level peaks, right? But then when it's done, it's like it drops pretty quick, and then you're back to baseline. The difference I explain to people with law practice is there's a moderate to high stress level constantly.
Yes.
There isn't a dip. It's a constant stress level that holds, which I think is way worse for you most likely. Now, given we're not necessarily getting shot at every day, but just in my experience, if I had to pick, I would go with the chasing people and getting shot at.
Well, no, I mean,
the stress level's hard.
Well, to your point, when we're in court, we're up here, right?
Mm-hmm.
The adrenaline's pumping. We don't want to lose. We're arguing about a case. You're competitive. I'm competitive. And then, most of the time people can go home, and when they're up here, they get to come back down. Mm-hmm. Well, when we get home, we have kids, we have responsibilities, we have all these other things. So we never really get to come down. We stay up here all the time, which, we have to find some way to deal with that stress. For me, this kind of leads into another subject, but it's been fitness.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing you and I both, I think, have a passion about. And just so y'all know, before we get in on her fitness stuff, so I'm competitive. And then a couple years ago, and I'm not a runner, so I know that it's never been my strength. My fastest mile ever, I was 26 and doing pro MMA at the time, so I was technically a professional athlete. And I did a mile in 7:42. That's the fastest I've ever done a mile for me. So Joni is nice enough that this year I decided, a couple years ago, I was going to run a marathon. And so we get this little running group together. And it was also a big emotional thing for me. I can't remember if I told you that. It was kind of cathartic because my son had joined the military.
You get to carry the boats.
Yes, carry the boats. I still got his band. So we got you, Alex, carry the boats.
Tank.
Yeah. And so several people, Joni was one of them, were real supportive of that, and she likes running. So anyway, long story short, we show up together. We end up here, actually, and we're going to go running. We were going to do like a warm-up, like mile and a half or something. We take off, and Joni's ass is gone. all you see is calf muscles. You got these big old calves and just trucking. And then all of us, the rest of us, there's a couple of other experienced runners, and nobody could hang with her. Like I've never seen anybody that can run like that. So anyway, you're and you obviously you can tell you're in good shape. But I know you do the Orange? Is it
Orange Theory?
Orange Theory
In Lakeland, yes.
So and I know that involves running, but like what is like if you had to pick one workout discipline, is it the Orange Theory? Is that like your pinnacle so far?
I would say yes. I just like its high intensity interval training, and I think it's really made me a more proficient runner just because they do a lot of interval training on the treads. You know, some days we do inclines, some days we do power days where it's all outs, and then all outs essentially it's kind of, I would liken it to sprinting. You're going to run so fast for an increment of time that your gas tank is empty. You're going to need to walk. Then we have endurance. We have days we focus on endurance where that's just straight running, no walking. Usually it's a 23-minute interval of, straight running. Then there's a rowing component, and then we have, some days we do body weight exercises, and then we do the dumbbells, but we also do weight training. But for me, it's a little bit of everything. It's a good total body workout, and it's my hour that I can go to the gym and not think about anything, and I can just completely mentally check out.
Yeah, but you go at like 4 a.m.
5 a.m.
That's crazy.
And usually I get up at 3.
Yeah, I know. So when do you go to sleep?
9.
So you get, how many hours is that? 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3. So 5, maybe 6 hours if you're lucky?
Yeah, I mean, there have been a few days that I've literally like dozed off sitting at my desk. And I have to, I'm a night owl. And it may be back for all those years I was on midnight shift. I'll go to sleep. Last night I went to sleep at 2:30 a.m. That's when I went to sleep. And then I went to sleep and I woke up.
Yeah, so basically. Now I'll still get up and do fasted cardio in the morning. Because see, I think you've got better genetics, obviously, than I do. I can gain muscle like this, but I also gain fat. So I have to be real mindful of my diet, and so I have to do even workouts. Like I don't like steady state cardio. I don't like running. I don't like elliptical, but I do it because it helps me keep my body fat down. Right. So I'll typically do 30 minutes of fasting cardio in the morning, and I've been shifting it up. So I'll do 2 days a week elliptical, 2 to 3 days a week swimming now. I've been doing the swimming. And then I'll do in the afternoon sometime, usually a weightlifting routine. And then in the evening, I'll do a run 2 to 3 days a week. I'm still running, even though it's nothing like you're running. I just get it done.
But you're moving.
Yeah, I'll do 2 miles. I mean, it's like 11-minute pace usually, 2 or 3 miles. And then I still spar twice a week in Taekwondo. So I'll still do martial arts, right? So that ends up working out every day. I'm doing roughly an hour and a half, 2 hours of actual working out during the day. That's it. It's sort of my maintenance workouts. Now, let me ask you this, because, see, I'm so competitive like you, and I always like to have a goal. And I've gotten now to where, since I don't compete in martial arts and I'm not powerlifting in competition, I'll set like a personal goal for the year that I'm working towards. And I know you messaged me some where you're competing with some of these girls in the class and stuff, but is there anything you're driving towards? Like, do you set any milestones that you're trying to hit, or is it just personal victory where you're competing with yourself now?
I mean, I do think at some point you do plateau. At some point you hit your peak. And I'm 47 years old. So now I'm learning that I have to be more mindful of injuries. Mm-hmm. So I try to hold myself back a little bit. Now, I will say, we always say it's you versus you, but my little friend group, I will say at the gym, there's a competitive component.
Sure.
But also I think it's inspirational and motivational. Like we all kind of motivate each other to try harder and do better. And in fact, we had a run row last weekend, and my girlfriend Stephanie, I don't think she'll mind me saying this, she said this to me after class, and she was like, all I was doing is I was watching you and trying to keep up with you on the treadmill. And, some people could look at that, oh, she's trying to compete. But then I looked at it like, well, that's a compliment. Mm-hmm. I was inspiring her and motivating her to try harder. And there's a guy at my gym, his name's Zach Rice, and he won't mind me calling him. That cat ran like a 5-minute and 20-second mile. So I love running beside him because he pushes me. You. He pushes me, yes.
Well, I think we're all kind of like that. I mean, I know Josh goes to the gym too. And I don't know that he feels this because I don't think he pays attention. But when I'm in the gym, I'm usually the strongest person there. And so occasionally, if there's somebody that's on a lift doing more than me, I'm like eyeing them, and Like, oh, how is it? Are they doing the technique right? Or in my head, competitively, like, why is it they're lifting more than me? And then if they are lifting more than me and I can't come up with a good cause, well, that's motivation for me that, I need to do more. Because if I had to pick right now at my age, I'm 45, I enjoy the heavy, specifically the powerlifting moves. My favorite is on chest day, I do heavy bench press. On back day, I do heavy deadlifts. And on squat day, I do heavy squats. Or leg day, I do heavy squats. And I look forward to those days to do, because kind of like you say, in that workout, especially when you're squatting enormous weight or deadlifting enormous weight, you can't think about anything else. And for the few moments where I'm in a squat with 400 plus pounds on my back, I literally get blood in my mouth where capillaries bust. I almost pass out during the lift. But once I'm up and I rack the weight, there's such a relief that comes over me, a stress relief. It's hard to explain to people. They're like, that's not good for you. I was telling my mama, and she was like, that's not good. You're going to die. And I'm like, we're going to die sometime eventually, but at least I died squatting 500 pounds,
Well, there's all these, chemicals that are released, that's what I like from running, is the adrenaline rush from running. And you're right. Like for me, when I'm running and I'm really pushing myself, I feel like there's been times I thought I was going to vomit on the treadmill, to be honest. I'm just trying not to die. Like that's what you feel like. There's times you feel like you can't breathe and you just don't stop moving. Because running is it's so mental. It's where your headspace is. If I can get on the treadmill and I'm not in a good headspace, I'm not going to perform as well. It's almost like you have to trick your mind that you can do it.
Yeah. Well, and you're right on the injury thing. I'm having to be more careful of that myself, because I've obviously had some bad injuries the last couple of years. But I was running about 3 weeks ago, and I was so proud of myself because I was starting to get sped up. And I had bought some On Cloud shoes, and so I've got my little shorty shorts, and I was doing a good job. And I think one thing had motivated me, it was right around election, because that week there was a lady that put on Facebook that she saw this super buff guy running. And it looked kind of like me. And I was like, that was me. Anyway, so I was like, yeah, they're noticing I can run and I'm a buff guy. So I'm running up by the high school, about a little over a mile in. And I got back, turned around to come back. And all of a sudden, something in my calf just pulled. I'm completely warmed up. I wasn't even really sprinting. I was really just doing my normal jog. Calf muscle pulled. And it was so bad, I could tell it was pretty bad. It ended up being a bad strain. It's better now. But I had to call Madeline to come pick me up. So then here I am limping now, this buff guy running, I guess. And my wife has to come get me.
Your limp of shame.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. It was right there by the high school, too. The kids are playing football. And I'm limping back. But again,
look at the old dude. But
the thing is, people say to both of us, I'm sure, why are you doing that? Why are you putting yourself through that? Well, one, it's good for you. It is good for you. Hopefully we say we're going to live longer. The stress will probably kill us, but it's good for you.
Most of it's good for you. I'm not sure if squatting like 600 pounds is
yeah, but it is good because here's the thing. When I'm on my deathbed, whenever that is, if I'm blessed and it's, 100 years old or however, I always try to do things that I've never done and things that are hard because I don't want to be old and be like, I wonder if, or what if, or could I have, I'm physically capable of it right now. And it's a way that I'm working towards sort of in martial arts. We have a concept called personal victory. I was just talking about this at the Taekwondo testing this weekend. The concept of personal victory is that you're not competing with me, you're competing with yourself, right?
You versus you.
Correct. And so what you have as a personal victory may be different than me. If we're running, there's no way I'm going to hang with you. So my personal victory is going to be different than your victory.
Yours may be run a 10-minute mile.
Yeah, exactly. It may, or just run, But so weightlifting for me is where I set these personal victories. This year I want to squat 500 pounds. And what I tell people is this. Let's say I don't squat 500 pounds, but all year...
Squatting 500 pounds. That's insane to me.
Do I know?
That's insane to me to squat 500 pounds.
Well, I'm close. But my point is, let's say I don't, towards the end of December is my goal, and let's say I don't do 500, but I do 475.
Right.
More than I would have squatted if I hadn't have done all this work to get there, right? So I think it's important to set goals that are high, have a plan for those goals, work towards those goals, and then if you hit it, great. If you don't, reevaluate it. And then Josh would say, what if you blow your muscle off your leg? It's worth it to me.
Me too.
It's honestly worth it to me.
The hip replacement will be worth it.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. The hamstring sucked. It was terrible. I went through a lot of mental trauma because I've been so physical, and I was like, that's it. my whole life has been defined by physical stuff. I'm the kicking lawyer. And then now I can't kick. And that was a big struggle for me. But, you know, the obstacle to get where back where am now has taught me a lot mentally, you know, that it wasn't the end of the world. There's other ways to perform. And you can regain a lot of that skill if you just do the work, you know. And that's part of why the squat is the goal. It's because I had a lot of people say, you're an idiot. You should never do that. You blew your muscle off your leg. And I'm like, well, look, I've never squatted 500 pounds. The most I ever squatted was 450.
But what's the saying? The comeback is better than the setback.
Sounds good. I like that.
Yeah.
So
That's
that's kind of what I'm
say.
living by. So are there any goals you're working towards right now physically?
No, actually not really. Like my goal right now, I have a senior in high school and I have a 7th grader that she's in middle school and she's a female, need I say more. So my children right now are taking a lot of my attention with extracurricular senior type things going on. So it's making it to the gym some days is a struggle. And
So that's why you go at 5 a.m.
Because yes, and too in the evening, like I do go in the evening sometimes because it just, you know, works out that way. But I feel guilty, you know, if they're at home and I'm at the gym. And I mean, Maggie graduates in May, and when she's gone, you know, when they spread their wings and fly, most of the time they don't.
That's kind of it. You don't see them as much.
No.
I got lucky today. My daughter came to town and ate lunch with me, but it's because I sold this van of hers. It was sitting in our parking lot or in our at the house, so she was getting cash for it. So I think that's why she came.
Well, that's when they come back to see you as money.
Yeah,
That's
they need
it.
the money.
I mean, at least we know.
Yeah.
You know, at least we know.
Now, I know that we talked briefly about you're interested in doing your own podcast, right?
I am toying with the idea, yes.
Mm-hmm. And what are you going to talk about?
You know.
I mean, obviously we talk about anything, but.
Well, so my girlfriend, Christy Cooper, and I, you know, we've been friends for almost 20 years.
And she's also a lawyer.
She's a lawyer. She's a defense attorney. So we thought about doing a spin, you know, and doing a little bit of the law stuff. And like, I'm the good person, you know, I'm good girl. She's bad girl. And so I'll be the person everybody likes, and she can be the bad girl that everybody doesn't like. I'm kidding, Christy, joking. But anyway, we thought that would be fun. And then also to do a relationship spin and talk about relationships. I feel like as women, we're nurturers and we're so giving, and we lose ourselves a lot. And, you know, everybody wants to find love. Everybody wants to find their partner. And I think as women, sometimes we don't value and know our worth. And I think it would be a good sounding board. And also to let other women know that you're not alone, that, you know, there's other people that's been through this. And I kind of would like to have it to where people could call in and ask questions and maybe invite different guests and just get different perspectives. But just to really find it's cathartic. You know, I've been through my share of failed relationships. You know the nickname. Me
too.
You know the nickname that Brian gave me. So,
well, that's what you're going to call the podcast, right?
I don't know. I'm toying with that, but
I like it. I told Joni she should call it the Man Eater Podcast.
Yeah. Anyway, there was a drink named after me at the cellar for a brief period of time, but in any event, I am toying with that idea just because I think it would be good to have, you know, a sounding board for someone to, you know, talk through things, get other perspectives, and let people know that they're not alone. And I think it'd also be fun and cathartic for me to talk about some of the experiences I've had. And if someone can relate to that, maybe my journey and my experience can help someone in their journey or whatever struggle or valley they're going through at the time. So Christy and I have toyed with that, and we think it would be fun and a good way to just maybe have a break from all the legal stuff, you know. And
well, that's kind of this. We call it law talk, but I rarely really talk about the law. It's normally me ranting about something, and that is sort of cathartic, you know. And I would, the only, I guess, advice I would say on the podcast is just to do it. A lot of people, I think, spend too much time prepping, training, planning. You should plan, but with this kind of thing, I think it's more you just got to do it and figure it out. It's like I told you, when I first started doing videos, the very first one I did in my living room on my laptop. Horrible angle. It was like the old guy, lower angle of the camera. And I did that. And then I started doing just sort of to get my name out, weekly posts with some kind of legal thing. And then I forget when I had a final, and then I told you I bought this tower. I still got it back in there that had a light on it and like a boom arm and a camera. And the camera actually wasn't as good as the laptop, but I liked the fact that it had so I would do the sort of little law talk on it. And then I eventually had a guest on. I forget who the very first one was. Again, and then at the time, Josh didn't work for me. I was videoing it editing it when I could on my own, using my own software, posting it, and that's what I did. And then eventually, we had Josh initially part-time coming in, and he was really to start with kind of producing the podcast thing. And then I decided, you know what? I want to start. I forget which year it was. It was like 2 years ago, right, Josh?
It was about two and a half, something like that.
Yeah, we decided to build a studio, buy the equipment, go all out, and of course, it was originally in the studio. The studio. I'm gonna show you. It's turning into a gym now, but
A gym?
it's a gym. I'll show you the other old studio, and so this was Josh's office too. But anyway, what I was gonna say is, so we got the big Mac there now that is what he uses to do all the digital editing. These cameras he can tell you about. I don't know about them, but we got that.
Canon 4K.
But I literally bought all this stuff. So the table specifically for it, the chairs, what it was going to look like, all that kind of stuff was. And then the other room, instead of sound panels, we had moving blankets that are also sort of sound absorbing. So in the old studio, you'll see it's got these like blue moving blankets up. Anyway, so all in. I mean, if you count the computer, it wasn't cheap, but I don't know. Let's see. What do you think, Josh? $7,000, $6,000, something
I
like
was
that.
gonna say between 6 and 7. Each of the cameras were about $1,000 each.
Yeah.
A little over $1,000 each.
Well, this table was $2,000.
Okay, yeah. So it's probably closer to 7 to 10.
Between 7 and 10 all in
Once you
is
count
what.
the
But
soundboard
you know, the
and
lights
everything
and
else.
everything. But I don't say that to brag about it. I'm saying that was an evolution to get to that point. And another thing for me, a little different than you, I did it as a marketing tool. It was part of my marketing budget. And even though I might never talk about myself at any point, you are talking and it's got that logo on it. So for me, it was always cross marketing.
Right.
And then my hope was whoever's on shares it too, builds my following. I'm in business, multiple businesses, it helps. So and then I enjoy it. Like, I like talking with you. I enjoy talking to people I would never talk. We had an Elvis impersonator. You know,
we had a clown.
we've had clowns on, and then I've had, you know, the mayor and
Jerry the King Lawler.
and
Oh, wow.
yeah, you name it. We've had all kinds of different experiences on with the podcast. And sometimes I remember there was one that was like 4 hours because we got a little intoxicated drinking bourbon. Josh hates those because he's had to sit over there.
By the end of them, they become unwatchable. Yeah. They're not even. It's not even watchable content anymore.
But my point, though, for everybody, you too, would be just to do it. Just do it and see. And then look, you can't get vested though in did people watch it or not. You just got to do it more for you, and then put it out there. And then if it picks up, it picks up. If not, it's still
Something fun to do. It's
yeah,
a hobby.
yeah. You got, especially if you're doing it with a friend. You know, like no matter who's sitting here, Josh is always here. He's my brother, but I mean, arguably a friend too. So sometimes he and I can talk about whatever. Speaking of that, you made me think of something. So let's see how it goes. We'll test it out. So Josh is single, right? Josh, you want to give her any insight into why you're single, and let's see what her position, her advice to you from a female perspective would be on that.
Well, it's two reasons. One's been bad experiences in the past. I've just been on kind of the bad end of some relationships where I've not been treated so well. We'll put it that way.
Oh, I've got the t-shirt, hoodie, bumper sticker, and fridge mug.
Yeah, so that's part one. More recently, as I've grown and matured, though, I've kind of let go of a lot of that, honestly, and it's more just sheer freedom. Like I like the idea of just being able to, like, if I just want to take a trip to Vegas, I just go take a trip to Vegas. Or if I want to go to a convention in Texas, I can go, and I ain't gotta, like, you know, not saying that, you know, every woman that I would potentially be in a relationship with would deny me the ability to have that freedom, but I do think that is the case. I see that with a lot of my friends that are in relationships, where it's like they're limited a lot on what they get to do or the freedom that they have.
So let me ask you this. If you met the right woman and she was your best friend, wouldn't you want to go on all of those trips with her?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So in some way, it wouldn't necessarily be like you're losing freedom. If you found the right person, you would actually be gaining freedom, right?
That is true.
I mean, it wouldn't be. You're making it sound really constricting and confining, and I do think with the wrong person, it is very much that way. But I think if you truly find the right person, which no judgment here, I haven't, but I'm an eternal optimist. Like, I want to find my person someday. I do, but I think that you would maybe have a different look at it through a different lens.
No, I think that's true. Yeah, no, and I'm definitely still open to trying to find the right person at some point. But
the problem is everybody. Can I cuss on here?
Yeah.
Everybody has their bullshit.
Right.
And you just got to find the bullshit you can deal with. And I think the older we get, the less tolerance we have.
Well,
100%.
And I'm not gonna. I don't want to go all Josh's laundry out here, but I genuinely care about Josh. I think about him a lot, and I talk with him even about my own sons. About we want him to find someone, and again, I don't necessarily want to speak for him, but I will. Josh got his heart broken. He really did. He was genuinely, I think, in love with this girl years and years ago, and then she hurt him really bad. And so my fear for Josh is he has now put up a wall, really, and really against all women in general, because this person hurt him so bad. And so what my concern is for him is there's benefits in relationships, especially a good relationship, that you got to risk. You got to throw some risk out there. There's a risk you're going to get hurt.
And it's scary to be vulnerable when that person literally holds your heart in their hands.
Yeah, and to get to that next level, you've got to be open to that. And my fear is he's so afraid of the being injured, like really being hurt, because he puts on this turf persona.
It's like running and you're getting an injury and you're scared to go do that same activity.
And the problem is there is a risk though, because there's a potential risk you're going to get hurt. But there's so much reward if you put yourself out there. I'll use Madeline and I. Madeline and I have had our ups and downs. We've had some difficult times. Like there was a time in our relationship it looked like we might not make it. And at this point in our relationship, we worked through that and are in a position that I have never been in any relationship before. That's loving and where I trust her and she trusts me. She's my best friend. We genuinely care about each other. She genuinely checks on me and I do the same thing with her. And there's a level of trust I've never had with a human before, And then
so let me ask you this, and
yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt, but this is a question that I struggle with because of things that have happened in my past and also the job that we do.
Mm-hmm.
We see, obviously we see a small cross section of society, but sometimes it's difficult to remember that that's all we're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And because we see that, do you find it hard to trust?
I think I find it hard to trust because of myself. I have made mistakes before and used to be controlled by certain impulses, especially when I was younger, and that I'm not proud of. And so I think a lot of times our inability to, I can't speak for everyone, for me, my inability to trust really, if I deeply analyze it, dealt with myself, because I couldn't trust myself. And so I assumed that everyone else was out to get me. And then I've been hurt too. I had a relationship where she was running around on me. But hindsight, when I try to really reflect on it, it wasn't just her. I was messing up too and doing stupid stuff and was being selfish.
So what I derive from that, and I want to make sure I understand you correctly, in a way, your trust issue comes from you project on them what you would do if you were in a particular situation.
A lot of times, yeah. I'm trying to be more open to people in general. Like Josh, me, and Justin, my other brother, all struggle with similar things that probably come from our parents to some degree.
It's always our parents' fault.
Yeah. Well, I've been in, I like to go to therapy. I used to think that was weak, but I do go see a therapist. And as I work through my own issues, I've come to realize a lot of the problems that I've had in relationships, for me, were my fault, really. And may have come from some issue that developed from my childhood, but ultimately, you've got to decide that you want to put yourself out there if you really want to benefit the most from, with no risk. If you don't have great risk, there's no great reward, so to speak. So
Josh,
to circle back, that's Josh.
Is that true? Do you think that's the reason why you haven't really met anyone, is you're afraid to take the risk?
Yeah, I would say that. I think I also have a lot of trust issues, but I do think it's like 50-50. Right? Like it's 50% what Jerry was saying about past experiences I've had that were bad, and I think the other half is the fear of some kind of loss of freedom. Because I've been single for so long now that it's like
you have your day planned out already.
Yeah, it's like I almost enjoy it to a certain degree, and it's almost like if somebody else comes in and messes up that schedule or what I have planned, it's almost hard for me to.
Yeah, and he may be super fine with that. I just feel like it's one of those things where until you've experienced that, you don't even know what you're missing. And so I think that's why, like, my son Austin, who is with an amazing woman, her birthday was yesterday. Happy birthday, McKenna. He and I have talked about how he talks about how happy he is with her, and hopefully they'll always grow in their relationship. But I think until you've experienced that, it's hard to, you just don't know what you're missing. So part of me where I'm like, oh, Josh needs to be in a relationship. He may not need to be, but I also want the best for him. I really do. I want him to be happy and feel loved and be loved. And I just don't want him to miss out on that aspect of life. But I also know it sucks when you get your heart broke and stomped all over,
And look, when you get to our age, if you're single, let's be honest, we've all had our heart broken. We've all been lied to. We all have trust issues. We all have baggage, and we all have bullshit. And it's so hard when, I think the biggest thing is to recognize, okay, where is this insecurity trigger? Where is it coming from and why? But a lot of times, my experience has been, look, I've had these things happen to me, and because these things have happened to me, I want you to be aware of, if I do this, it's not about you. It's just something, if you can be patient, I'll work through it. A lot of people want to turn it around on you and gaslight you. Oh, you're using your past. You're holding your past against me. We all have a past. We are all a product of our experiences, and I just feel like, and maybe you can give me a guy's perspective on this, I feel like that is the most unfair thing a man can say to a woman. I feel like their job should be, if they're a good guy, should be to reassure you and try to at least ask questions and try to understand where you're coming from. That's where communication is just so important.
Yeah, so I would say, because I know exactly what you're talking about, and I have experienced this even with Madeline. Men, and this is a generic statement, okay, and I guess now that Trump's going to be president, I can talk about being a man again. But generically, men, I think, are better at compartmentalizing things. And so for me, with my own past, I'm real good at putting it in a box. Literally in my head, I visualize it's like in a box, goes in a file, and I close it off, and it's done. And I'm done with it. I don't need to bring it up. I don't need to talk about it again. I don't think I do anyway. My therapist says I do. But like I can move forward, and it's all in a box gone, and I don't think about it. Whereas I think women's brains are more, all those drawers are open at the same time, the exact same time.
It would be scary if you could see a picture of what goes through my brain
Yeah.
all day, every day.
I told my wife, I think with the difference with men and women is with a man, like say it's a computer screen, the man has one program open, and he's looking at that one program. And these other ones are all running in the background, but they're closed, right? He's just got this one. And then a woman would have like 87 tabs open at the same time.
That's on point, 100%.
Yeah. So anyway, so not to keep picking on old Josh over here, but I'm just very interested in it, because he's my brother, and
I think people, honestly, I think Drew Wayne suffers with this. And I've even got friends and stuff that I think struggle with this. Is I think some people have a hard time relating to somebody who's like so okay with being single, or even in some cases, I mean, I even have days where I'm arguably happy that I'm single, Now that doesn't mean that I'm not, again, open to having a relationship, or, that I wouldn't be happy in a relationship or anything like that. But I think that is a struggle that some people have. And so they see that and they automatically assume, because I'm single, that, oh, well, in order for him to be happy, he's got to be with somebody, or he needs to find someone. And so I think that for people who are in relationships, particularly in happy relationships, that it's difficult for them to relate to me in that way, because they can't fathom how somebody could be, happy or even satisfied just being single. If that makes any sense.
The saying is, you can't be happy with someone else until you can be happy by yourself.
It's true, yeah.
So maybe there's hope for you just yet.
He's not, but I think he's missing my point though. I fully believe that you can be alone and be happy. And I think you should be, honestly. You're right. I think it's healthy if you can be happy alone, right? And I think a lot of people struggle with that. And not to knock, I have one ex in particular that doesn't jump from one ship till there's another ship there, if you know what I mean. Like, There's always another ship, and she's never been alone. And I think that you have to have some alone time, and that's good, right? My point, though, is I think there's levels to the happiness. And like children, the pinnacle of happiness for me has been with my kids, getting to see them, raise them, be with them, see them become happy. It's the pinnacle of happiness and the depths of despair, because eventually they get where they don't need you, and that's sad. or they're hurt, or they hurt your feelings. They're the only ones that can really hurt you.
Or when they're middle school and hormonal, there's that.
Yes.
That's the depth.
Yes, when they love you and hate you.
Yes.
And so Josh, I think, is a good person. And I think he's got a lot to share with a relationship or to the world. And I think he would be a great father. And so I just don't want him to have closed the door on that. And, like you say, as we get older, our options become less and less. And so just as his brother, the only reason I bring it up, it's not to pick on him. It's that I want him to have those levels of happiness. I believe he's happy, and I think he would always be happy. But, there's an aspect of life.
It's an addiction
Exactly.
too.
Exactly.
It's not taking away. It's just an
I think
added
so.
bonus.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so not to pick on him, but you talk about relationships, and I like to analyze my brother.
Well, if I start a podcast, Josh, you may be my first guest.
Oh,
There you go.
I appreciate
You
it.
can work
I'll
on it.
happily come on.
Well, start tying it up a little bit. Josh, could you give her some direction? Because one thing we were going to talk about was the podcast. What do you think, if somebody was going to start a podcast, is like essential equipment they need to have?
Well, starting with, I definitely recommend a Mac for editing, because anything you're going to do video production wise is Macs are just best for that. You can edit on PCs, but they're just not as effective.
But it doesn't have to be the big fancy Mac we have,
it
right?
Have to be
You
a
could do
huge,
like a
fancy
laptop.
One. You just want to make sure it's got at least a decent enough graphics card that it's not going to be chugging while trying to.
Okay, you're speaking a foreign language to me, so would you at least do an introductory course for me?
Oh yeah. No, I could break down any of it for you. But yeah, you essentially just need a Mac with a solid graphics card.
And see, that's the Mac. That big thing.
Yeah.
So you're used to
It's
seeing
all
laptops,
Yeah.
but we've got a desktop Mac over there that's big.
And then just good mics. Good mics. We had really crappy mics when we started, and now
That's
we
nice.
finally got.
I liked them because they were gold, the first mics we had. And he just made fun of them, and so now we have these nicer mics, yeah, and
I
mic
feel like
stands.
I'm on Howard Stern in a way.
Well, we can make that happen.
Yeah, but this has been much cleaner.
yeah, so far. Yeah, and then, but like I said, he probably agrees with me too. I think in the beginning you just start it up and try.
Yeah, you have to start.
play with
You're
it.
going to mess up with a lot of stuff in the beginning. I mean, the only way to really learn how to do it is just to get started. And your first couple episodes might be terrible, but they're never going to get better if you don't start doing them at some point. So you get better with everything with practice.
I just have to come up with a name. I don't know about the man either. I mean, that's a little intimidating.
Well, it doesn't have to be. The name doesn't necessarily have to reflect on what you're talking about. If you look at a lot of the big podcasts right now, they're kind of generic. It's just a name, and like Joe Rogan Experience is. It's just his name, really. And then he talks about whatever with whoever. We call this Law Talk, but it's never really about law.
Law Talk.
In retrospect, we probably should have just called it the Kickin Lawyer Podcast.
Yeah.
Because I think there is some other much smaller podcast also called Law Talk.
Yeah.
It causes some confusion. So I will say this, whatever you name it, research ahead of time. Make sure whatever name you're considering doesn't already exist. It isn't already associated with some other podcast out there just to make life easier on you.
And, podcasts don't have to have the visual component either. You can do just audio podcasts. Madeline listens to a lot of those women-oriented podcasts, and they're just audio. There's no video. I like the video component, though, because it gives you another element to post. You can go to YouTube. We put it on Facebook and make clips of it sometimes. And anyway, I like it that way. So, well, anything else you would like the public to know, Joni, about...
I feel like we've covered a little bit of everything.
Yeah. Well, that's what I want. Well, I enjoy your perspective on being a prosecutor too. Like, all jokes aside, a lot of clients even, I know Roy, you probably know Roy, right? The older guy that comes in a lot, is sometimes crude. Roy Blackwell. He don't care if I've had him on the podcast before, actually. Roy had told me one time that before he sort of understood how it worked, he went and had a lawyer one time for something. And then at lunch, he saw the lawyer and the prosecutor over there eating together. And he was like, how are they doing that? He's supposed to be arguing for me. But this is our job. And just like you have coworkers, I look at you guys as coworkers. That's why
we've eaten lunch together.
That's why I got so bothered by the whole when the clerk wouldn't let me go back behind the thing. Is because that's like my place of work to me, and then I'm getting treated differently than the other people that work there is my perspective, even though I get that, I'm a private lawyer. Anyway. So my point was, I think people don't understand that we are still coworkers, and because we do have to work together all the time, we can be professional and be friendly even with each other and still literally fight. It's no different than I've had in all the fights I do.
There's only one exception to that rule, one defense attorney that I would never eat a meal with, and I would never
Is that one the one that we had a bet one time on how many cats they had?
Yes,
that's
that
what
would
I thought.
be the
Yeah.
one.
That's what I
Yes.
thought.
And
Just
I try
so
not,
you
and
know,
I try not to wear that color to court ever.
just so you know, that one has grown on me.
Oh, don't
Personally,
say that.
no, really. I even talked to Brian one time about seeing if that person wanted to join up with
Jerry,
us.
just stop talking right now. I'm losing respect. Stop.
Well, that person, we don't just say that
Jason?
person's name, but that person's gonna fight. You know, even when they probably shouldn't, that person's gonna fight. So
Yeah,
I respect
we'll
that.
We'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Well, Joni, thank you for joining us
thank you
on
for
our
having me.
podcast.
I enjoyed it.
And if you have a podcast, you have to let me come be a guest on it.
Well, obviously, of course.
Okay.
But Josh is maybe from my first.
That's fine.
guest.
You can have him, and we can go through all his traumas, and
That's
then
right.
yeah,
We'll dig through all the trauma.
Hey, that could be like 10 segments, probably.
yeah. You can make a whole thing out of whole series out of Josh.
Yeah.
And thank you guys for watching too. As always, like I said in the beginning, please like, follow, and subscribe. It doesn't take any seconds for you to just click the like or the subscribe button, and it helps us out. So please do that. And we are on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcast, all that stuff. And you're probably watching this on Facebook. And then if you haven't, please go follow us on TikTok. We spend a lot of time putting those things together. It's a lot of fun. And then, as I mentioned earlier, if you haven't already, follow Michelle Allen too. She's got her own social medias, and if you're buying, selling, renting, leasing real estate, she'd be glad to help you anywhere in West Tennessee. So give her a holler. And if you want to learn to kick people in the face, just visit masonsmartialarts.com. Been open since '93, so we definitely have experience in it. Running a good special right now where you get a uniform and 30 days of lessons for $99. And if you want to find really unique gifts, make sure you visit us on the square at Jam Books and Records on the square in Covington, Tennessee. And then last but not least, if you need help with your online presence, social media, website, commercials, just visit masonitemarketing.com. And again, I thank Joni again for joining us today, and I'll see you guys next time, so keep kicking. Thanks for watching, guys. Just remember that this is not legal advice or investment advice or business advice. This is for fun and entertainment purposes only.